Well, it has been a long journey to be here.
Yeah.
It has been quite hard to find a spot in Porto for us to talk. But I think that in the end, it's fitting that we find this place that is called the meditation room, right?
Yes.
So I think it's a great place to talk about spirituality, to meditate in a way, as we plan to do. So I want to thank you, firstly, personally to you for all the effort you had in arranging with the owner from here, and also to Manna, is where we are, for giving us the space to have this conversation.
Yes, Manna is a very special place. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for suggesting this idea.
I was going to say Manna is a restaurant, as a shop. I don't know what this is.
I would call it a space. Maybe after we can ask Sarah and Elder, but it's a coffee place that has a space in the back. This patio, beautiful patio that is right here next to us. That we have yoga classes here. And besides eating and drinking and practicing yoga, of course, they have some products that they have for sale here. For example, all the books that are also mostly related to yoga and to lifestyle. And this is one of the reasons that I love this place, that it's not just a coffee place and yoga and that's it. It really focuses on the yoga as a wider concept than just moving your body and exercising.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I've been noticing, that more and more these kind of spaces that are not pure restaurants and not pure yoga studios, they're kind of appearing and merging. And I think it's a very fascinating. And we met because I came here as a class, because we teach yoga here. And during the class, I was very impressed in your approach to yoga, because one of the things that struck me was that it gave the impression that for you, yoga was not really a physical exercise, but the way you conducted the class, it made it look more like a journey. So I wanted to ask you, I was curious, how do you actually see yoga?
Yeah, so yoga is so many things, and it also changed a lot for me. When I started doing yoga, I thought of it as something very specific, and now I think it's something completely different. And I also expect this idea that I have to keep changing with time. So when I started yoga, it was more about the physical aspect of it. I didn't even know that there are other aspects of it. I used to go to the gym because I thought that's what people are supposed to do. And then I didn't really see results, and I didn't really understand that concept. I was just going there. So then I started doing yoga at home, just following some YouTube videos, and I loved it. I think it took me about 2 years to understand the wider concept of yoga, but still something felt like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So I started that. And then it was just a form of physical activity for me. But with time, I started understanding that if you spend enough time, not necessarily alone, but it can be alone or in a class, just focusing on what's happening to you when you're moving, you can discover so many more sides of that yoga. So yoga is actually the meaning in Sanskrit, in the Indian language. It means union, which is also can be thought of in more than one way. Union, it's like uniting maybe two things, maybe more than two things, but it's definitely more than one thing that is uniting with another thing. And traditionally, the concept was more about uniting with God or a higher spirit. And these days, now that we live in the modern world and we have different ways of perceiving ourselves and the world, then you can look at it differently. So I see it as a connection between me and myself, the self. So this is, for me, this is the union that is yoga. And I think that when I feel it the most, when I feel yoga the most, is when I'm at home practicing by myself without any other people and without any specific plan that I have to follow. I just try to listen to my body, my mind, and my soul and allow it to take me wherever I need to go that day. that time.
That's so fascinating, and in a way, it's sad that in the modern world we lost this connection to the higher God. God, not in really in the literal sense, but God in the sense like in this abstract thing of something that transcends us. And well, I've been reading a lot about spirituality and religion, and I think there's a lot to go there. But that's another whole. What I found also amazing was that you said that it was a connection between you and yourself. And that's something I was also thinking in my mind as we were saying, that maybe it could be the connection between us, maybe your physical bodies and your physical minds. But when you say me and myself, who are those two parts exactly?
Yeah. So this is a great question. And I think the answer is different for each one of us, because each one of us has their own way of seeing the world and their own way of defining things. So I consider myself to be not a different part of me, but a different side. So when I'm in my day-to-day lives, I have a certain me that needs to function in society, needs to be nice to other people, needs to bring money home because things cost money. And this is one me. And being different in certain situations doesn't mean that you're not you. It's just a different side of you. And the self, the searching of the self can take years. And I think that sometimes you can find it and then lose it again and then find it again, and it will be different already. But the self, I think that is something that is deeper than what we can use our mind to say that, okay, this is me. Like you can say many things about yourself. You can say that you can state your name, your age, where you're from, but there's more to you than this.
One way I think I can relate is that from what you're mentioning, the me is more like the projected identity that you have, because identity is something that is socially constructed and you build your own identity in relationship to everyone else in society. That's why you said you have these different phases. In work you have certain identity, at home you have another identity, and that's normal, that's part. And I noticed that the self, maybe in my case, would be something like the idea I have of myself. That is, unfortunately, sometimes different than the idea I project of myself. So one thing is the idea I have of myself, and the other thing is my actions. Because others perceive you according to your actions. They cannot read your mind. So your identity is built in the way that you operate in the world through action. And I noticed that, maybe myself is also that idea that I have that is very different from what I achieve. It's like what I want to achieve and what I think I am, and then I try to manifest that idea in the real world. Does this make sense to you, or did you mention something like this?
Yes, I think everyone can define it differently, and I think it makes a lot of sense what you just said. But actually, if you want, we can try a quick exercise to maybe meet the self, if you want.
Let's try.
So also, like for those who are listening, maybe you can try it as well. We can just close our eyes and take about 20 inhales and exhales, which is for most of us will be at least 1 minute. And then just see what happens with your eyes closed. So you can just close your eyes and breathe, and I will tell you when it's time to open them.
Okay, I'm closing my eyes now.
And start to breathe. You can slightly let go of your shoulders and your face and really just focus on breathing. And if other things are happening as well, that's fine. Keep your eyes closed, keep breathing just a little bit more. And you can take 2 more inhales, or if you already got to about 20 inhales and exhales, then you can stop and open your eyes. So this exercise we just tried, it's actually just one form of meditation. Meditation is just about being aware and trying to not let our mind to take us to other places. So maybe you can tell me how you experience this time of closing your eyes and just focusing on the breath. What else happened there?
It was a conflicting moment to me, or conflicting minute, or conflicting minute or period, because usually when I'm having a podcast like this, usually my brain is very active when I try to listen to the person I'm talking to, and I'm always trying to find outs in the conversation, so lines I can pick up and I can continue. So I'm always trying to pay a lot of attention and thinking at the same time. So one part of my brain wanted to be that active, and the other part was trying to go with what you were saying, to completely relax and let go. So I tried to do it, and the first seconds I was asking myself a lot of questions, but then after some period I say, okay, let's just be in this moment, let go of the thoughts, or not let go, because you can never let go, but more like try to control them and not have them be active, but just try to perceive what is around me. In this case, maybe the sounds, myself, my arms, my shoulders, my face, and just try to be in the moment.
Yeah, nice. So was it hard for you to let go of thoughts and to...
You can never really let go of thoughts. I don't think you can ever silence your mind. And that's something that also struck me during your class, that usually some teachers, or some people in YouTube, or whoever you are listening to while doing yoga, or whoever you are following as your guide or professor, I don't know what is a correct term.
A teacher, or yes, whatever you choose to call it.
Okay, so your teacher, usually some people say that you should not think, just be in the moment, but I feel that is very hard. And one thing that you mentioned in your class was that you tried more to steer the thoughts, more like maybe away from the normal life, the stress that we have every day, but not suppressing the thoughts, but having them focus on the moment.
Yes. So like you're saying, it's really hard to not control the thoughts. It's really hard to make them go away. And you're right, it's impossible to make them go away. Like if you will sit down to meditate or choose another pose, maybe laying down for meditation, whatever you choose, you will notice that the thoughts will keep coming up. Even if you manage to stay quiet for 1 minute, after a while something will happen and your mind will send you more thoughts. Your body will send you signals or sensations, and that third part, which is inside of you, that some people call the soul, some others will call it their inner child. I like to call it the emotional side of us. Will also send us some signals. And we are used to acting in a specific way, so when your mind is sending you thoughts, it will be very hard to not act the way you're used to be acting. And this is what I think the intention in meditation is. You don't want to make the thoughts disappear. This is just your body, your mind, your entire you is functioning. This is a good thing. But what you want to do in meditation is just try not to get carried away. Try not to have a thought and then automatically responding and maybe thinking, okay, I now have to follow this thought, and maybe develop it to more thoughts and just lose completely the connection of where you are right now. And this is something that in yoga is there's a term that is called chitta vritti, which is actually the way that the mind changes. So there are 5 different types of chitta vritti. We'll not get too deeper into that. But it's just the way that our mind is working, and we don't want to fight it. We just want to learn how to work with it. So the intention in yoga in general is just to be happier, be more calm. And it's not about trying to not be you or trying to stop the thoughts completely. It's just about learning how to deal with them better. Just like in life, you don't want to have only good moments. You will inevitably have also bad moments, but you just want to learn how to deal with those better. Because if you have a positive approach and you know yourself well enough, then you can go through anything and be more or less okay.
Yes, for sure. That is really, really important because, especially in our society today, we tend to see only the highlights of other people's lives. So we only see the positives. Social media does this. Television does this because you see the big actors, you see them on the screen, you see them giving the interviews after the movie is successful. So we see only the great things about them. But every single person has bad moments, and every single person deals with failure and insuccess and frustration. And it's exactly as you said. I think that one of the key parts of your character, one of the most important characteristics that you can develop in your character is just not to get too confident or too hyped when you achieve something, and not to be too disappointed when you fail at something. So try to find some emotional level in the between that is moderation. So, because also, and do not expect that everything will always go well, because it never always goes well, but at the same time, it never always goes bad. So, yeah, always, yeah, if you keep a positive mind, as you say, I think great things can come. But another thing that you mentioned, like you have this idea of steering the thoughts. One thing that was noticeable in your class, and I enjoyed a lot personally, was that even though as a teacher you were showing the positions to do, you didn't expect students to completely replicate what you're doing, and you made sure to emphasize verbally that it's okay to explore your own movements and go where your body takes you, more or less this idea. Is this related to this idea of flow of ideas where you want the students to go in their own path that is not necessarily your path?
Yes. And it's nice to hear that this is something you liked, but at the same time, some students might not like that. And this is just something to notice. Like if you like something or don't like something, it's just one more thing that you can learn about yourself. So yeah, I believe that we each have our own way of moving, we each have our own way of thinking, and we each perceive the world in a different way. And that's why sometimes if you don't agree with someone's opinion, it doesn't mean that you're not thinking the same. Maybe you're just defining it differently. And it's possible that even just one word that someone else used is not, you're just not feeling it, and then you will not agree with the whole thing. But yeah, I think that in a yoga class, we are built more or less the same as humans, but we all have different ways of moving. Just even if you look just at your arm, you can move it in ways that maybe someone else can't. So it's very important to remember that you don't have to be something specific. You don't have to move in a specific way. And generally also in yoga, there's no goal. There's no real goal besides being happy. Besides just learning yourself and learning how to function in a way that is the best for you. So yeah, when we're practicing in class, and I don't know, it's a headstand class, I don't expect everyone to do that pose the same way, just because you can never know what a person is going through on that day, or in which part of their process they are. Let's say they're someone like you that does calisthenics, maybe some things are easier for you, but you went through your process to get there. So if someone is missing some part of their journey, it's impossible to just jump to the next step. And also the journeys, the steps, the order of things, it doesn't have to be the same for everyone. Like I always like to tell my students that yoga is a wonderful way. I think it's a great practice that combines movement with breath and just noticing your mind a little bit and maybe your emotional side. But you can achieve the same goals by doing other things. You can, for example, go swimming or running, which is something that you also physically moving, and you also have to be very aware of your breath. And you can meditate or take some quiet time for yourself, some in another part of your day, and you can achieve all of those goals maybe from different things. You don't have to choose yoga. But I feel like personally, maybe I'm not completely objective, but I feel like it's you have a benefit if you're practicing that, just trying to combine all of those components together.
For sure. As you were speaking, I was recalling, because I had also another conversation as part of the podcast with Nina Brio, that was from Yoga Maono. We were talking about Alentejo, and she's in Alentejo. She has her own big quinta, or it's called Casa Maono, where she has she has a farm, and she does yoga. And I was talking to her and about her experience and what yoga also meant to her. And one thing she said at some point, as I was talking about I think it was about awareness, because I was telling her how I did handstands. I felt like this awareness in my fingertips. She was something like, okay, that is important. That is your way to achieve that. I achieve that way through yoga, and you achieve that way through something else. And that made me realize that the exercise is just a means to an end. I don't know exactly what this end is. Maybe it's the connection of the me and myself, as you said. Maybe it's the connection of, not a connection, but maybe it's becoming happy, as you also said. But that was when I really started to see it as more than exercise only. And that's maybe something that you also noticed when you started doing yoga in the commercial gyms. That one way it's only exercise. For them, maybe it's only exercise. But there's also this mental state that you should achieve that you mentioned. And
yes.
I was not sure where I was going with this, because I have so many ideas and I got a bit lost in the process. Maybe I need to meditate to settle down. But one word you used was the physical body at some point during the class. And physical body seems a bit of a contrary idea, because every body is physical by definition. So is there any body that is not physical?
Yes. So in yoga, actually, there's different ideas and concepts, but like I told you, there is sort of dividing the self, a person, into a few different parts. So you have your physical body, which is that just in this world. And if you believe in the concept of the soul, it doesn't matter if you're religious or not, then you would agree that the soul moves on without the physical body. So this is why you can look at in yoga, you have your physical body, you have your more of the mind, which is also connected to the physical. It's all connected, but you can sort of separate different parts in you to better understand yourself, and to have your awareness focusing on something specific, because it sometimes can be too hard to focus on a wide idea. Mm-hmm. It can be easier to just narrow it down to one thing. So yeah, the physical body, we all have our physical bodies, and they help us exist and help us get along in the world and do whatever we want. And this is why in yoga, sometimes it's easier to start with poses, something physical, because people are aware that they have a body, and sometimes it's easier to connect to the physical body. So you can, after that, try to notice thoughts, emotions, and maybe some spirituality in a way. In yoga, sometimes it's separated into 4 parts.
4 parts?
4 parts. The spirituality, the mind, the emotions, and the physical body. Again, different styles will define it differently. But also I have studied a little bit of Buddhism as well, and I really connect to that idea of trying to separate the whole into parts. Because, you know, sometimes you talk and we're not even thinking about that, but you say me, or you say myself, or you say I, and sometimes you say I listen to myself, or I am mad at myself. And it just brings me to think, what is the difference between me and myself?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I sometimes angry at myself? What is this self? So again, it's just a way of paying attention. And yoga is so much more than just the physical aspect, the asana. Asana is a pose in Sanskrit. And it can be easy to start with the physical part and then move on to other parts. So maybe you have heard before about the 8-limbed path.
I have not.
Which you have not. So if you practice yoga for a long time, maybe you have heard of it. It just gives you other aspects of yoga. So what we are all familiar with, the yoga, which is the poses in classes, this is just one part of it. In a style that is called Ashtanga, it actually means 8 parts of yoga. You have also the parts of the breath, breathing exercises, which is called pranayama. You have sort of 10 rules to live by, that you just to make sure that you're a good person and you're not harming others. So some things that you can find in many different cultures that are more or less the same. So you have to study yourself to be aware. You have to not steal, not harm others. And moving on, you have other parts that are the meditation. And eventually, if you asked about the end, what is the end? The last part of that path of those 8 topics is called samadhi in yoga, which is like nirvana or enlightenment or something, if whatever you want to call it, which is the end. But I believe there is no end. Like when you get there, it's just like another loop. You move on to the beginning or some parts in the middle. Again, you never have an end. And
maybe that is a part of the journey that you're talking about. Because a journey never ends. A journey is a process. It's not the end goal.
Yeah.
Or actually the finish line is not the goal. The goal is the process itself, is a journey.
Exactly. And also in yoga, the goal is not, you can say that the goal is samadhi, this enlightenment, because this is where you want to get to, but there's no goal. You just have to walk on this path. And it's very interesting because also I think sometimes students come to classes and they want to succeed in a headstand or being flexible enough, and this is something that also the traditional yoga doesn't see as the goal. It's called the fruit of the practice, and you should not practice to gain those fruits. You should not practice to gain flexibility or to succeed something so you can and a different time show it to your friends and family. The goal is just to put yourself in many different situations so you can observe yourself in each one of them. So you can observe yourself in a headstand. You can observe yourself seated down on the mat. You can observe yourself just before you're going to sleep. This is just another way of getting to know yourself, which is the goal, in my opinion.
That is a great way to see it, and it's also so great because I think it's absolutely correct, and it's an archetype of behavior, how to conduct. It doesn't tell you what to do, it tells you how to conduct yourself in the world in the most abstract way possible, and then if you behave in that way, you get all these results. But if you chase the results themselves, then maybe you lose motivation quickly. And I see that, for example, if you make the abstraction, for example, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, which for some could be walk somewhere in the middle between chaos and order. Or if you think of the yin-yang symbol, you have the light that symbolizes the order, everything that is stable in your life, everything that is known in your life, your safe zone. And we have the dark part that can be seen as a chaos, which is the part that is unknown to you, where you don't feel, where there's misery for you and you don't know how to behave. And this is actually an idea I got from Jordan Peterson. He talks about this a lot. He's a very important philosopher, maybe one of the most important philosophers of our time, that he says that people should walk in the middle. So in the middle, so that you have one foot in your comfort zone and one foot in your unknown zone.
Yeah.
So you have the stability, but also the desire to explore. And if you do this, like, it doesn't tell you actually what to do, but as you say, it's more like if you behave in a certain manner in the world, then you will reap all the different fruits from your actions, from your attitude, from your adventure.
Yeah.
So it's like, it sees life as an adventure. And maybe this is the topic where I wanted to get a while ago before I got lost in my train of thought, was that until I came to your class, if people do ask me, do you do yoga? I would say yes. I would say I don't do yoga formally in the sense that I put on a mat and I lay down and I meditate. But I would say, yeah, I do calisthenics, I exercise a lot, and during my sets, during my reps, in between, I stretch. So it's kind of like yoga. I would say it's the same result as yoga because it gives me the same flexibility and mobility. But after seeing your attitude and seeing your perspective, I'm starting to doubt this. I don't think it's correct anymore, because the experience I had in your class was just not the fruit. I came closer to the idea of the process. So for me, your class was more like a mystical journey, in a sense, because I really felt it was for the first time when it was very clear to me that this was not just physical exercise. This was a means to something else.
Yes. I agree with you, but I think I would get to a different conclusion. I would think that what I'm thinking is that everything is yoga. Even just now, you can lift your arm up and then you can put it down. If you pay enough attention, this is yoga. I think the difference is that in a class, when someone else is deciding what you have to do, and it's not you at home, it's just sometimes easier to pay attention and to not focus on the goal. Because if it's you deciding, then it's hard to know, okay, where am I going? Yes. So you focus on the goal, and then you know where to go. And when you come to a class, it's very brave in a way. I think that students coming to a class, they have to be very brave to just really let go and to listen to something someone else is telling them. Which is not like, I don't take it for granted. Yeah, but there's no, again, there's no way to really define yoga because it can be so many different things. But for me, I have a good friend that is also a yoga teacher, and he always says that if you only have 5 minutes to practice yoga, if you're a yoga practitioner and it's something that you're doing every day, and on a specific day you only have 5 minutes, he says just do Shavasana, which Shavasana is the last pose, which you're just laying on your back, opening your arms to the sides and opening your legs a little bit also to the sides, and just laying there and breathing and noticing. And this is the most important thing that he says, and I agree with him. Because it's just about the paying attention. It's not about working your shoulders or your knees. You're just paying attention to the entire self.
To your body, your physical body, and then your mind somehow connects to that body.
Yeah, this is something that is hard to define. Maybe you'll just need to practice it a bit more so you can understand it in your own language, in a way, not Portuguese. I mean, your own language of André. Because it's just something you have to feel. I think it took me about 2 years to understand that yoga is more than just a physical exercise, even though I knew it already. I knew that I heard people saying that it's not just a physical exercise, but I could not really understand it until I felt it, until I allowed my thoughts to go far enough And until I learned how to control those thoughts and how to bring it back to where I was at the same time, just something you have to feel.
There's a big difference between knowing and actually two words in my mind, but I had the words in Portuguese, but now I lost them in the translation.
Maybe
but there's
like experiencing.
Yeah, there's a big difference between knowing something and like understand. Oh, that's the thing. There's a big difference between knowing and understanding.
Okay.
Because we know many things, but we don't really understand what they mean, and sometimes we really need to go through that. Sometimes we need to make mistakes to actually understand them.
Yeah.
So I'm not surprised that your journey took so long, but at the same time, I don't think that for me 5 minutes would be enough, because maybe for you who is experienced, you know, who has been thinking about this, who has had a long practice, then you can abstract your soul in those 5 minutes, because you already had all this preparation in your mind. You know, it's a time to settle down, your body is ready, your mind is ready, you know what you're going to do, and you can just let go and be in the moment. But for someone that has not had this path, let's say someone like me, one of the factors that I believe that was so important in your class was just to take this 1 hour just to go to a yoga class, not to just stretch during 2 minutes between a set, during whatever workout, but to just, okay, say, I'm going to take this hour of my time, I'm just going to be here. And I'm not going to think about anything else.
Yes. I agree, and I have to admit that when I started just practicing by myself at home, and after a while that I understood the possibilities of yoga, at least on the physical aspect, 5 minutes were not enough for me. Like I had practices like me at home by myself for 3 hours, because I felt like I have to do all of the different poses to have a real practice. And I agree, maybe you need more experience and to go through more things, and then after a while you understand that you don't have to do all of it. And it was hard for me also when I started teaching. I wanted to do so many things. I wanted the students to go through so many things before I understood that, okay, we cannot do everything. We have to choose some things, and it's enough. Like even one thing can be enough.
When you say many things, it's more like a workout that you have to... It's the vocabulary that is familiar to me, so sorry if I bring you to this terminology, but it's in the sense that, okay, we need to do A, B, and C, because A will lead to this, C will lead to this, and so on. So this whole structure,
yes.
This kind of planning that you had?
Yeah, so there's kind of a structure to a yoga class that if people want to practice at home, it's actually a good thing to know that... the first thing that you have to know is that, each class ends with Shavasana. And I like that fact, because also I feel like each life ends in the same way, where the Shavasana actually, it's the corpse pose. This is the meaning of it. You're sort of imagining that you're dead and really just letting go of everything, including your physical body, and just trying to observe. So I like the fact that we can all do different things in our life or in our practice, yoga practice, and eventually we're ended up in the same place. But usually you start a class or a practice at home, just focusing on your breath. So it's just a way of connecting to yourself, a way of not doing this transition from your day-to-day life into just sitting down and not doing anything, because it's really hard. Sometimes it can even be hard to just try to close your eyes just like that in the middle of the day, or whenever your practice is. And then you focus on the breath, and then you start with sort of warming up, which is I don't really like to call it warming up, because it reminds me again of just like the gym or usual normal sports. I feel like it's a matter of connecting to your physical body. Just like imagining that you have a child and you take it to a day, like, I don't know, to travel somewhere. You're not just taking him or taking that child somewhere and just doing everything without telling him you want him to be aware, you want to be together with him on that thing. So for me, it's not warming up, it's just a matter of connecting with your body and telling it, hello, this is what we're going to do right now. And then your body is saying, hello, this is what I'm able to do right now or today. And then you sort of connect and just make sure that you have a smoother practice, that you're not going to push yourself or push your body into places that it cannot go today. And the pushing part is also actually very important, because this is something that only you can know. I cannot, as a teacher, I cannot come to you and while you're doing Warrior 2 and say, André, come on, please do better or do more or try harder. I don't know if you can try harder. Only you can know. And only you can tell if in that specific moment you need to try harder. You need to maybe push yourself or even be sort of aggressive with yourself. Or maybe it's the opposite. Maybe you need today to be more relaxed, more kind to yourself. This is, again, it's just a way of knowing yourself, knowing your comfort zone. Maybe your comfort zone is to push yourself. And maybe it means that you have to take a step back.
So as a teacher that does not know what each student is either thinking or feeling or what is their limits, because as you said, the limits only each person knows its own limits. So how do you try to conduct a class in a way to unlock this?
So it's a great question, a question that I'm still asking myself every now and then, because when I have students that I do know, of course, it's easier for me to know their limits. And then sometimes I get to a point where, I do know their limits maybe better than they know them. But still, I believe that it's not my place to come and say, you're cutting yourself slack today, maybe try a bit harder. Because again, this is just another experience that you have to go through. Maybe if you will be too gentle with yourself for a longer time, you will just discover that you're not getting anywhere. And this is yours to learn. But in a class, usually I just have to notice the students, notice how they're doing in the poses, maybe noticing other things that, for example, when you sit down in the beginning of the class and you breathe, it's pretty easy to notice which ones are struggling with just breathing and which are the ones that feel very comfortable by doing that. So I can tell you about myself, for example, when I started and I went to classes, it was very uncomfortable for me to just try to sit down and do nothing. And I'm not an extremely active person, so I would expect it to be different. But that's how it was for me. And then it was a sign for me that, okay, I need to do that more. I need to meditate more because this is what I'm struggling with. It's like, I like to call it like you have an open task on your app. Mm-hmm. Like when you feel uncomfortable with something, it means it's a signal that this is a topic that you have to work on. So I felt in the beginning that I was very comfortable with the physical part, but not so comfortable with not doing anything. It's not really not doing anything, but that's how it felt to me. So I knew that was something I had to work on.
I think the hardest is knowing that you have to work on something. So I think that the hardest thing about solving a problem is just assuming or acknowledging that you have a problem. And so it's like the first step. The first step to any resolution is identifying and say, okay, we have to work on this. And you mentioned that when you started yoga, you sat down and you were uncomfortable. You said, okay, I need to work with this uncomfortability, or I need to become more comfortable in breathing.
Yeah.
So do you notice that when the students come into your class, they already have taken this step? They already know that they need to work on something, or do you feel they are exploring still and realizing that they need to work on something?
Some of them, but anyone at any given moment has to work on something. Like we said, it doesn't really end. Like even now, I don't know how you perceive me. Maybe I'm for you, I'm a teacher, so maybe I know everything, but I'm also a student. I also practice by myself at home, and I notice what's hard for me. And maybe sometimes now it's not so much like a pose is difficult or the breath is difficult. Maybe it's just when you're quiet, you have your thoughts and your emotions. Maybe it's just an emotion that I'm having a hard time with. Maybe I discover that I have a hard time dealing with stress, or I don't know. Everybody has a hard time with that, but some people are able to push through it and to be okay with that, and some are just avoiding this emotion or this situation completely. And this is actually another term in yoga that is very important, in my opinion, that is called samskaras. Samskara is like an impression or experience you had that leaves some kind of leaves something with you. Each experience you're going through, you learn things. Maybe you don't notice it, but you learn things. You learn if you did well or not, and then it affects your behavior in the future. And samskaras are the loops that we're getting into, those patterns of behaviors that we're getting into after having a specific impression and learning something. So maybe, I don't know, someone who was in school, for example, you can say something when the teacher asks you something, and then you are saying something right or something wrong, and maybe the other kids laugh at you, and maybe you learn that, okay, maybe I should not speak in public because people might laugh at me. And then you forget about it, but you move on for the rest of your life, and you just have this knowing that, okay, speaking in public might be bad, so I'm not doing that. Maybe you don't even remember why you started doing that, but these things will keep coming up throughout your life. So this is another thing that I feel like is very, like, it's fascinating to just try to learn your patterns and to work on them.
Do you think these things come up while you meditate?
Yes.
Is that it?
Yeah. And maybe you can also, when we were breathing, like before, just having those 20 breaths, just breathing and closing your eyes, maybe you notice that your mind or brain tried to take you to the same place again and again. So, for example, now you're doing something. You're not just here talking to me. You have to worry about sound and everything. So maybe your mind kept taking you to one place over and over again. This can be a pattern, but it can be something more complicated than that. Maybe something that you will need to experience one thing more than once to even be able to notice that.
I think so. Well, there's I think there's several layers to that. There's an immediate layer of things that worry, which are things that can happen in your everyday life. For example, as you say now, the sound, the video in the back of my mind, I'm always worried that something will go wrong.
Yeah.
Because it has gone wrong in the past for me. So I have that little bit of bad experience, or I'm trying to be aware of that or to minimize the error. And then I was also talking to a person close to me the other day, and she said something that made me really think about it for some time, that sometimes you have emotions that or sometimes people have emotions that are coming from unresolved trauma, and these things we're not aware of. So the context was more or less like you're experiencing this because maybe you didn't think about it enough. Because you had this happen in your past, and at the time you didn't really understand it, you didn't really process it, and because your mind did not make its peace with that situation, now it's still coming. And for example, it's making you cry, even though that you're like, for example, crying and you don't know where the tears come from. But in the back of your mind, at the subconscious level, at the deep layer of your consciousness, it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something like that. Again, there are different ways of defining the same things, but I agree with you. I think this is something that sometimes we're aware of the trauma that is happening, and trauma doesn't have to be an injury or someone attacking you. It can be just a very uncomfortable situation where the class or just one kid is laughing at you. It can be something like that, or it doesn't even have to involve other people. You might have, like me, for example, I don't like to forget things. So before I leave the house, I just have this habit now that I'm aware of. I will just take like 5 minutes, which is too long, to just look around and make sure that I didn't forget anything. And I'm not really sure why it happened, but I guess that sometime during my life I have forgot some things, and then I went to work or something like that, and I didn't have those things, and I was just mad at myself for not having those things. It doesn't have to involve other people. It's just something that I learned, this is a place that I don't want to get to again.
Those are scars. I also have some of these scars. For example, I've left house a few times without my key, or my key was inside the house.
Yeah.
And then you close the door and you have this feeling that you know that you fucked up and you're in a bad position. And I noticed that now, every single time before I leave my house, I stand at the door with one foot in the door before it closes. I touch my pocket to make sure I have the key. And then I say, okay, it's here. Even if I know that 20 seconds earlier, I put it in some backpack. I always have this reflex to, okay, let me make sure again, because I don't trust myself. I know I will forget something. Let's make sure everything is okay. And it's a behavior that, stays with us from this trauma, in a way.
So exactly, that's that. It's just patterns, and it doesn't matter where they're coming from, but the important thing I feel is to just notice them, because it's just another way of you getting to know yourself. And if you know that you have this pattern after you have noticed it, which is, like you said, the first step, you can think about if you're benefiting from it or not. And if you're not benefiting from a certain habit that you have or something else, you can then after choose to maybe change it. You don't have to keep doing the same things if they're not good for you. And same thing goes to yoga. Sometimes, and it's really easy to practice at home and just keep doing the same things over and over again. But it's also good to try new things, just to test yourself in new situations. Not really testing with grades, just to test yourself to observe.
Do you know Wim Hof?
Yeah.
How much do you know him?
I don't know him personally, but I tried a lot of his breathing exercises, and I learned a lot about his what's behind his method. And again, this is what I told you. You can swim or run. You don't have to do yoga. But the meditation, I think that is important. And there are so many different meditations. There are meditations that you can call them proper meditations, which is just you sitting down with nothing in the background and just allowing yourself to get lost and find it yourself again and get lost and again and again. And there are meditations that you are like guided meditations when you listen to someone else. And a yoga class is a form of actually guided meditation because you're listening to someone else. But you can also have a walking meditation or a running meditation. So to me, Wim Hof, a lot of the components of his method is actually meditation. When you get into cold water and you feel those cold water and you feel that it's uncomfortable, you usually just want to escape physically or in your mind, and just staying in this uncomfortable situation is the real thing, I feel. Yes,
it's one part of learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and just not seeking always be hot. I don't have much experience with the Wim Hof method, I must confess, because at least for me in Portugal, it's hard to come across like really cold water. Like really cold, like minus, or not minus, but below 10 degrees or something, or even negative. I had this experience in Finland, for example, where I remember last year, we spent a New Year's Eve in an ice lake. In a really nice cottage with a sauna by a lake, and the lake was entirely frozen. It was the end of December, and the Finnish people love sauna. I think sauna is even a Finnish word. and they have this habit of having very small houses with just a living room and a sauna, and they're just right next to the lake. So you can actually leave the house, walk in the frozen lake, and then they make holes on it. They put some candles around the hole, and you imagine the scene at night with some candles around the hole. So, and you just go and you go right inside the frozen water. The water is frozen on the top layer, and of course, and it's very cold below. And then myself, before I would do this, you're like, oh, you're crazy, you're going to this freezing water, you're not going to stand there for any time. But when I did it, it's such a wonderful experience. As you say, you go and you feel this water in your shoulders, and there's this instinct to kick you, like, run away, get out of here, what are you doing? Why are you here? Go away. We'll go back to the sauna, to the warm place. But another part, if you just push these initial thoughts away, another part really tries to be in a moment and be aware of your body in a way that is not normal or not usual. But yeah, this was just a little detour. What I practiced most in Portugal was the breathing, because one part of his method, if correct me if I'm wrong, was just to lay down and take very deep breaths. I think hold it as well, right?
I think also.
Go. Yeah. And I did it for some minutes. One sensation I got was that it's like your mind starts to leave your body, and you feel a tingling in your limbs, in your fingers, and you have a very weird sensation in your body. And that's very meditative, because it really changes the way you think, it changes the way you perceive your body. And I noticed this in your class as well. It was the second time I had this, maybe because of the breathing, maybe because of the long pause. I think that also one important factor was, as you mentioned, the guidance of a teacher, having someone that can guide you where you have to go, and you don't have to actively think, so you can more easily let go and just have this voice come through your ears and tell you. And by the way, you have a really nice voice, a very soothing voice. So it's wonderful to listen to you. And maybe also, I think also the music played a part, because you put a really nice music, really soft, but it was very in the atmosphere, and music has this effect to induce altered states of consciousness as well. So maybe all the factors together, but yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I felt really this tingling, and you feel your body in a different ways, and you can really let go of certain things and try to meditate to deeper levels.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, breathing is a great way of doing that, and yeah, most classes, like I told you, start with just noticing your breath, because usually when you just go to work or walk down the street, you don't really notice your breath. You're doing it naturally. And when you notice your breath, then you can work with it. So usually you'll hear teachers in the beginning of a class saying that connect to your breath, and whenever you feel unsafe or like something is wrong or just need a moment, you can always reconnect with your breath to go back to that zero state, to just sort of start again and feeling safe, and then going and doing the rest of the things. But yeah, lots of different like cultures and methods focus on the breath, just because it's something that is very, it's like it's right here. It's hard to ignore. If you start to notice, it's really hard. It gets hard to ignore. And about music, actually, I just wanted to mention that there's a book. It's actually in Hebrew. I'm from Israel, so I read it in Hebrew, and it was written by a yoga teacher that she talks about many different situations in yoga, in the practice. And actually, she mentions that the music is just an interaction. A distraction, and she prefers to not have classes with music. And I love to have music in my classes, just because I feel like it helps you get to sort of where you should be, even though you shouldn't be anywhere, but it helps you get in the right mood. but I agree that it's a distraction. And when I practice by myself, I usually practice without music. It doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Just I feel like after a while you want to challenge yourself more and more and more just to, again, experience yourself in different situations. So music maybe can be a shortcut for you, that after a while you don't need it anymore. You can get there naturally.
Yeah, I don't agree with music being a distraction, because music is really powerful at levels that are not consciously aware to us. There's a reason why Greek plays the classical works. They had music. Nowadays you only have the text, for example, of these classical works like Oedipus, and we are missing the music. And the fact is that the plays are not the same with the music or without the music, because the meaning is different. That's the important thing. Like the music carries us to perceive the world in a different way. It's a shortcut, exactly as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So a shortcut is not a distraction, because maybe you can take the long route to go to the same destination, or maybe you cannot reach the destination without that shortcut. So it's not really a shortcut, but maybe a different path. I'm not sure.
Exactly. I feel like it doesn't mean that I'm right, but I agree with you. I feel like it's maybe it's in class, maybe it's a shortcut to get everyone to the same level of, okay, we're starting the practice. But in real life, it's just another experience. So if you have music when you practice yoga, or if you don't have music, it's just two different experiences. And you can benefit from each one of them. You can benefit from the one with the music and the one without the music, just because you're going through a different thing. And anyway, even if you will try to replicate exactly the same movements, the same music, the same space, the same time of day, it will still be something different every time. You're a different you accumulate more experiences, you have different thoughts and different ideas every moment. Actually, maybe after this conversation, I hope you will have some new thoughts. So it's different every time.
Yeah, we're in a constant transformation, and even interaction, just talking to someone, changes us. It changes our brain, changes what we think, hopefully, if you're open enough to let yourself change, which is not always obvious. But yeah, that's an expected step. You mentioned that you're from Israel, and which I knew, of course, already, but I was wondering about that, because the idea I have, at least about Middle Eastern countries, that they are very spiritual. I would normally use the word religious here, but in my small worldview, I used to connotate religion with monotheistic religions. So Catholicism, Judaism, and so on. And I would say, educated myself more and started to open my perspective that religion is much broader and much older than these monotheistic religions. And that part of the world where you are from is where many of our religious ideas come from. And religious in a very broad sense, more like in the spiritual sense, like our connection with something higher. One God, many gods, doesn't matter, like a connection to the transcendent, something that is higher than us. And I was wondering since that that part of the world is so spiritual, and since yoga, or at least from your perspective, that yoga tries to connect the self to this transcendent, to this journey, to the mystical somewhere that is beyond or ahead of us. I was wondering, like, how much did your origins influence the way you think about yoga specifically?
I think it's inevitable that each one of us are from birth. Actually, things are affecting us, and so I do believe that I might have been spiritual also if I grew up in other countries, but yeah, it of course it has a direct connection to the fact that I'm from Israel, and I think that most of my life, just because I grew up in such a religious country, not in a religious place at all, like I was not religious at all. I think I was always a bit afraid or trying to step back from the word spirituality just because I thought it was the same. And I never considered myself a spiritual person, and I didn't want to be a spiritual person. But now I feel like being from this place, I can now see more clearly, and again, this is just my opinion, that spirituality and religious are not the same. Like religion maybe is another loop, another habit that we have. Like we want to be spiritual, so we're being religious and just do the same traditions again and again. I think it's about having the intention. So if you're religious and you have the intention and you have the awareness, that's great. But if you're just taking that shortcut again, doing some things that you're supposed to be doing to connect to God or to something else, I feel like it's not real anymore. And I feel like now I know that you can be spiritual without being religious. You can still be religious. I don't think that's a bad thing. But I do think that it's important to still have yourself. Like, okay, you can have the guidelines of a religion or of a specific religion, but you still need to have yourself, because if not, you're just following instructions and not really feeling something. So it have definitely affected me a lot.
Just to make sure I don't say something wrong, what is the main religion in Israel at the moment that you grew up with?
So the main one is being Jewish. Most people are Jewish, but there's like almost half of the population is Muslim. And there are many other different religions, just more like of minorities. But yeah, it's... I have to admit that it's something that I don't really feel comfortable to think about and to talk about, just because, yeah, it's an example for me of how religion can take you to the wrong side of being spiritual.
For sure, and it's very hard to have this conversation as two modern people, like two people that were born in around the 2000s. Because for maybe 2,000 years, we have been told that to be religious is to believe in these monotheistic religions. And that's actually not true. That's not true. That's not what the human experience has been. And one of the great discoveries that I had in recent years has been the expansion of the scope of religion to much, much older. Because before these monotheistic religions, humans were always spiritual, and people were always religious. This is something that is as old as we have a conscience, and as old as even before our species. So this is something that is, and so when something manifests itself in many places across time, is because it's true, or because that's a really deep meaning to it. It's not something that someone made up in a specific context and just tries to convince everyone that it's true. But if something emerges spontaneously in several spots or in several moments in time, then there's a really deep truth to it. And being religious or being spiritual or believing in something, is an aspect that every single population that we know of that existed in human history has manifested. And I was saying it's hard for us to have this conversation because my instinct until recently is the same instinct as yours. Like you say, religion, I don't want to go there, I don't want to believe, because what we have been told is that to connect to this transcendent, let's call it God, you have to do these rituals. In Catholicism, you go to the church, you have this very specific structure of mass, and you pray, and now you say this, and now you say this, and then you walk and you take this thing in your mouth, and that's supposed to be the body of Christ. So you have these very specific rituals. But the truth is that before this Christianism, Judaism, the spiritual experience was much looser. That's still the leftover of that is still in Nordic cultures. For instance, in Finnish spirituality, they still have a big connection to nature, and they try to see this transcendent, these gods in the several little things of nature, in the little elves in the forest.
Yeah.
And but the main thing is that before the ban of, I'm going to mention the Catholic Church because I don't know so well about what Islamic cultures did, the Jewish did, but it's probably the same. Like before this ban on drugs, the human religion was deeply connected to the use of psychedelics, and psychedelics were another shortcut to release the soul from the body and to make us connect to something higher than us. So it was the main message that I got from the shamanistic cultures, from the shamanistic religions of the past, from South America, from North America, also from Africa and from Asia, which is basically to say from everywhere around the world that we know of. Every single continent had these sort of experiences that were ways to transcend consciousness and really to connect to something. The important was not the ritual. The ritual was just a means to something. It was a journey. It was a journey that each person had, and it was individual, and it was very, very impactful because, for example, the old Greeks, the ancient Greeks, they had these journeys still. They still had access to psychedelics because it was the 4th century before Christ. And there was in their society at their time some politicians, they had a ritual that the most educated people in ancient Greece, they would go to this specific place once a year and they will have a mystical experience there. They will talk to an oracle, they will take some substances, maybe play some music, and they will have a religious experience. It's in the true sense like a religious spiritual experience. I don't know how to distinguish the two words. I know you said that spirituality was above religion, but I don't know how to distinguish.
No, it's just a matter of how you define it.
Yeah. So let's say they had this experience, and at some point in time, and they do this since forever, because no one knows where it comes from. They were just doing this, and at some point in time, someone said, "Let's tear this place down. This place is no longer necessary." And the reaction was so strong, and some authors really said that if you take this down, you take like the good of humanity away. Because they knew that it was just not an empty ritual. And the part of the empty ritual that you are opposed and that I wanted to express, and it has been a long detour and a long speak from my part, has been the religions of the last 2,000 years, these monotheistic religions, they were built upon these more spiritual religions, but they took, for example, the psychedelic part of the potion, of the Eucharist in the Christian ritual, let's say. They took the psychedelic part, they took actually the part that would connect us to higher, and they just kept the ritual without any meaning itself, just a theoretical meaning, but it was not actually meaning that something, it was just a meaning, it was just words, but it was not actually something that you act and that you feel. So maybe that's where the emptiness comes from. And that's why it was hard for us to, as modern people, to have this conversation, because we have these rituals, but you are actually disconnected from the state or the journey that these rituals were supposed to induce.
Yes. Again,
Sorry,
it's a matter of...
I spoke
no,
too much.
Thank you. It was actually really interesting, and I have to admit I'm not an expert of most of those things. I don't know a lot about that. And like I told you, I was trying to move away from religion for most of my life, just because, I don't know why I had this idea that it was something bad. These days, I don't think that. I think that you can be religious, you can follow a specific religion and be very happy and have a really good life and also do good for others. It's just a matter of how you're doing that. And this is why I feel like you can be spiritual with or without religion. I feel like when I practice yoga and I feel a connection to myself, I feel the spiritual side of me. So I don't know, maybe some people will say that a connection to yourself is not a real connection or not a real spiritual connection, but again, I think it's about how you feel. And you were mentioning psychedelics a little bit before, and again, I'm not an expert, but I think that it's another shortcut. It doesn't mean that it's bad. Maybe this is it's a part of your path, but I feel like we can get anywhere we want with those substances or without. Maybe it will be harder, maybe it will be longer without, but it's just a matter of awareness.
The shortcut is exactly the right word, because this again, this is a topic that might be difficult to talk about because different people have different perceptions, and nowadays psychedelics have been equated with drugs, and drugs have been equated with party drugs, like something you take, have some fun, and then after the day you're someone new, and that's be seen as bad. But the way I mentioned psychedelics was more in the ritualistic sense. So something you take in a specific setting, for example, with some music, with a shaman also, or with a spiritual guide, something that is very controlled and there's actually a meaning to it. And that, as you said, like it's really a shortcut to induce something in your consciousness so that you learn something that you didn't know before.
Yes.
So just to clarify what I mean by psychedelics is in this perspective.
Oh, I completely agree. And again, I don't think it's a bad thing. It depends on who you are and what you need at that moment that you're experiencing. But yeah, the ritual is, it depends on where you take it to. It can be spiritual or not. You can just do it to get it over with. And some people might look at me that I practice yoga almost every day, and I take out my mat and I put it on the floor, and then maybe I take a few breaths, and then I have a ritual. So maybe some people would look at that and think I'm religious, and it's not true.
Not true.
Yeah, it might be true.
So there is some truth to it.
Each one of us has their own truth. So maybe to you, if you would look at that and say, oh, it's like religion, being religious, that's true. But I think it's about the intention. I felt like if coming back to talking about Israel, I felt like being religious is doing something for someone else, and being spiritual is doing something for yourself. So again, you can define it differently, but that's how my logic is working. And that's what makes me feel good. Like if I'm doing something without understanding it and I'm doing it for someone else, I will not benefit from that. But if I'm doing something because it feels right for me, then I will benefit from that. And that makes it right for me.
What could be doing something for the others that is not for yourself? What would fall under that category?
Well, it depends if you're asking me or asking yoga.
No, I'm asking you. Of course, I'm talking to you.
So in yoga, there are, like I told you, besides practicing the asanas, which are the poses, there are other aspects. So you have those 10 rules, maybe more, but officially you have those 10 rules of 5 of them are how to behave with others, how to behave in society, and 5 of them are referring to how you should behave with yourself. So one of those things of how you should behave with yourself is one principle that is called svadhyaya. Actually, we will have a workshop here soon about that, which is self-study. Like I told you, if you study yourself and you know yourself better, then it will just make everything easier for you and for others. Because if you know yourself better, you will be happier and you will inflict less sadness or negative things on others. And for example, one of the things that you're supposed to do for others is non-violence. So like in many cultures, you should try to not hurt other people, not to steal their belongings or not to steal their time. I'm not very good with time, as I told you, before that podcast. And yeah, that was interesting for me, actually, that concept that being late in yogic eyes is stealing someone else's time. And I think that was the real change for me, that I stopped being late so much. Now I'm just late some of the time.
Well, I think Portuguese people really need to hear this because we start things very late, and yeah, I think more people should have that perspective that when they're being late, they're making someone wait, and that time is not coming back ever.
Yeah.
So I'm surprised you became more like that in Portugal, because I should have the opposite influence, which is making.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with Portugal. It was just my own process of understanding that. And then after a while, when I was practicing yoga, I started to have more interest in the philosophy and the history. So I studied things more. And then I discovered that. And yeah, it was just something that I thought, wow, this is, it's actually stealing. I didn't think about that before. But going back to your question, I think personally, I believe, and it might sound a bit bad, I don't think you should focus on what you should do for other people. I think each one of us should focus on ourselves, trying to be as happy as possible, and that will be the thing that will benefit others as well.
Yeah, as you said, is again, a person I admire a lot is Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you know him.
What's the name?
Jordan Peterson.
Okay.
If you don't know, but I was thinking, and I think he thinks very well, and he's thought a lot about psychology and how to bring out the best version of yourself and to manifest it into the world. And one of the conclusions he reached was that before you try to change others, or before you try to make the world a better place at a big scale, you should start at the smallest scale possible. And the smallest scale is individuality. So we have to do the best for ourselves, to fix our life first, to make sure that everything we're doing or to make sure that we're not doing something that will hurt us or will harm us. There's also an idea that you express. So
yeah,
that whatever we are doing is something that will lead to a better life for us. And then when you have yourself in order, you will kind of start to move out in external layers. Okay, so you fix yourself, and then you fix the people exactly next to you, like your family. So you try to be the best you can to your family. And then if everything is good with your family, if all the relationships are repaired, you try to be a bit better to the community in which you are inserted. And you go through all these layers before you try, for instance, to become a prime minister, and you don't know who the hell you are and what you want for life. So if you don't know who you are and what you want, and how can you expect to manifest that to a big scale, like a national scale?
Nice.
Yeah, just came to
me. I like this idea. And actually it reminds me of the fact that nowadays in this modern world we have, like for me, I'm a yoga teacher, and there are lots of yoga teachers, and we get paid for that. Like we go to a class, we get paid for that. The students pay money to participate in class. But traditionally, before in India or other countries in that area, a yoga teacher or a guru or whatever it is, they would not get paid. They would have a community, and each one of those yoga teachers would serve their community just to help them with whatever they can. And they will not get paid. They will just get taken care of by their communities. So maybe some people would bring them food, some others would help them fix some things around the house, or if they had a home. So yeah, it's a different concept, and it's very, very interesting. Community.
It's the same. Well, I think the idea is the same. Like you give something in your time, but you give your time in a valuable way, and then you are given something back in return.
Yeah.
And we do that. The modern equivalent is you give your time and your experience, and you get money back. Yeah. But at the end, it's the same thing. You get something back, like love from the people around you.
Yeah, I don't see it as a bad thing. I think all of us should be doing things that we're good at and that we're enjoying. And yeah, of course, there should be something in return. I don't see it as a
No,
bad
but
thing.
it's a beautiful way to put it. Like you do something for the community, and the community creates conditions for you to thrive and continue doing what you're doing.
Yeah,
That's a
the
really
community.
beautiful way to put it.
Yeah, the community is supporting you back for
Yeah.
supporting them.
You mentioned many words from yoga. All these words I cannot remember because they're so different from
It's
mine.
okay.
And also, if I recall correctly, the type of yoga you teach was Vinyasa yoga.
Yes.
So, what is it exactly, and how many types of yoga are there?
Wow. Okay, so there are endless types of yoga, styles of yoga. I can say that there are maybe 4 or 5 major ones that you have probably heard of. There's Ashtanga yoga, which is a series of practices that you go through, and it's basically more or less the same thing every practice. You have Hatha yoga, which is originally actually the only form of yoga that was physical, is Hatha. This is the physical, the asanas. But today you have so many others, like things I have never heard of as a teacher also, because again, you can take it to wherever you want. And my style of yoga is Vinyasa. This is what I studied, but it's not always what I teach. Because again, I think it depends on the student and on the time, maybe what you should be doing. And Vinyasa is a flow. It's a style of yoga that you move from one pose to the other in a way of flowing. So it's more fluid instead of just, okay, now stand up and do this other thing. Now sit down and do this other thing. So there's more of a flow that some people connect to that, some people don't. And Vinyasa is also the style, but it's also that movement that maybe you remember from class, that it's a combination of like 4 poses that you move from a plank to half of like push-up position. And then you open your chest up to what's called upward facing dog. And then you go back to downward facing dog. Downward facing dog is that pose that looks like a pyramid, more or less. But again, it's not so important, because I really believe that you have endless types of yoga, endless styles, because each one of us needs a different practice. So you can take some different components from yoga, some breathing exercises, some poses, and you can make André yoga at home. You can choose whatever you want to do. And the style is just, again, to try different experiences so you can observe yourself in different situations. That's how I feel. But maybe if you'll ask an Ashtanga teacher or someone from India, they would say that, no, this is the one real style of yoga. And it brings me back to that time before I went to India once. I plan to get there again. But before I went there, I had a teacher. I was in this course about yoga, traditional yoga, and about the history of India. And before I went to India, I asked my teacher, I told her, if I want to find the real, like the most ancient form of yoga, like the real yoga, where should I go in India? And then she told me, and it was pretty, like, I was a bit sad about that in the beginning. She said, you cannot find it. Like you, Kim, from Israel, right now, you cannot find it. Why? The real yogis, the real yoga teachers are, like I told you, they don't get paid for that. Some of them are staying in the mountains, sleeping in caves, and are not really connected to society, and they are definitely don't speak English, and you will not be able to communicate with them. And also they will not just want to teach you one class, they will want to take you to a journey. So it's impossible for me to actually get to a real yoga teacher and learn real yoga. Also because yoga have changed so much. Now it's something like more modern, more that is related to the physical body. But in the beginning, the physical aspect was a very tiny portion of what yoga is. It was more about the practices that, like in religion, like you have to clean yourself, you have to surrender to God, you have to all of those things that are not what now we think is yoga.
So these guys still exist that are in the mountains, very secluded from everyone else.
I haven't seen them, but there are, the people that live like that.
Wow.
Apparently.
Well, in a way, it's not surprising. Well, of course, for us modern minds, it seems very alien. It sounds almost stupid. Like, why would you isolate yourself? But the human spirit works in ways that we do not understand. And another thing that comes to mind was about these old religions, much before these 2,000 years, like thousands and dozens of thousands of years into our deep history to the past. Some traditions that are still manifested nowadays are, I think, in Tibet, around that area of the world, like Southern Asia, is some people that I don't want to say something wrong, but some people will be locked in a house, in a dark room, for a stupid amount of time, like 14 years. So they will go kind of young and they come out just kind of middle-aged. Or they go middle-aged and they come out old, like really long amount of time. Imagine yourself 14 years in a dark room. And they do this. And this was a form of meditation, I assume. I don't know, but they would come out and then they would express their teachings and their advice and what they learned to the community, and they will just tell the community how to behave. And this almost does not make sense to us. It's completely unbelievable. So I'm not surprised to see that the quote-unquote real yoga, because maybe it's not real, maybe it's each person's journey, so there's not real, not truth, or not false. But I'm not surprised to see this kind of spiritualists to go ways that normally we would not even think of going, like staying away from everything, just go to a cave, live in a cave, get some fruits for some people, and just want to embark someone on that journey for a long time, not just a one-time class.
Yeah, it is crazy to think about that, just because we're coming from, we were not raised like that, so it can look crazy for us, but it's all a matter of where you're coming from and what you need at that moment, because maybe for some people, even sitting down and closing their eyes for 5 minutes, that can look crazy. Like, what are you doing wasting those precious 5 minutes? It all depends on who you are and what you've been through up to this moment. So I don't know, I cannot understand that, but I can understand that maybe some other people can need that. This is what they need right now.
But it's a challenge. You said you went to India, but how was your journey? Like, you were born in Israel then?
I was born in Israel. Yeah, maybe this is something I should have done in the beginning. I was born in Israel, and I only moved here almost 6 years ago. Here, Portugal. Portugal, 6 years ago. And it was, for me, I was looking for something else. I guess I needed that part of my journey to be completely different. I needed to step out of my comfort zone. I needed to try something new, and that's just what I needed. It doesn't mean that someone like me in Israel that didn't move here is making a mistake. This is just their own way. And for me, it was really good, and I love Portugal, and it gave me a lot more free time to focus on yoga and actually focus on myself, which sounds kind of weird to focus on yourself. Like, before, when I told you that I sometimes had 3 hours practice, it sounds like you focus on yourself for 3 hours. That's not very productive and not very good, and maybe a little bit narcissistic, but I truly believe that each one of us has to do that. And it's not just that. For you, it can be 5 minutes, and for me, it can be 3 hours. But we all have to respect where we're coming from, not just the name of the state, but what we have experienced in the beginning of our lives, and just try to find a balance. Maybe someone that grew up in the most modern place and all had just materialistic stuff all their lives, maybe they do need to get into a cave and not go out for 10 years. It depends on who you are and what you need.
So you were always living in Israel before you came to Portugal?
Yeah, always.
Oh, that's surprising. And did you go somewhere for yoga training? Because this is like you need to get certified, right?
Yeah, you need to get certified. I didn't go there, actually. I had a little experience with the different teachers. So in the beginning when I started yoga, I didn't think that I have to get certified. I thought that this is just a hobby, like something that is a tool for me, and that maybe I can share with others, that I was sharing with friends and family. And I never thought it would be something that I will do as a profession. I never thought that this will be my job, and I never saw myself also teaching in a studio. And this is why I like Manna so much, because this is the first place that is more similar to studio that I taught in. And it's not a studio, and I'm saying it in a good way. It's not a yoga studio. I hope they are not defining themselves like that, but for me it's just an amazing space to practice yoga in.
This is actually something I want to talk to you about, because you mentioned this previously when we spoke some other time, that this was not a studio, and I was surprised because I have no idea what is a studio. So what do you see as a yoga studio?
Okay, so again, this is just a matter of definition, and maybe it is a studio, and I'm sorry if I'm saying that it's not. But for me, a studio, and I'm saying it kind of in a negative way, but it can also be something good. For me, is to go like to a gym and to have a class that maybe has 30 people that don't get enough attention from the teachers. Sometimes a student doesn't need attention at all, but me as a teacher, I would like to have the ability to give attention to all of the students if they need
like
it.
4, 3, 4, 5
Here
people, right?
it's a
really
small place, a small space that we have up to 12 students. But yeah, what I like the most actually, and what I wanted to do in the beginning, was only private classes. I now teach groups, but I feel like in a private class you can just really get what you need. And you can also do that in a full class with 10 other people.
So private is 1-to-1?
Just one student with one teacher. But you can have a private class with other students as well, because you don't have to do everything that the teacher does. You can just do whatever you want to do. So getting the instructions and maybe follow them and maybe not. But yeah, as a teacher, it's something that is important for me to at least be able to give attention to all of the students if they need it. And
so a studio has this connotation of mass-produced place, and
also
in your perspective.
Yeah, and also on the teacher's side, in a studio, usually it doesn't have to be like that, but you have many classes per day, so you can have maybe 6 classes per day, and maybe other people can do that. I don't know, I hope so, but for me, I know that I will not be able to give my best for six times in a row, classes in a row. So that's what I mean. But again, it doesn't have to be a bad thing, and maybe some people only have access to those studios, or maybe they only have access to YouTube videos. It's all good. Like whatever you choose, it's good. It's just a matter of getting to know yourself and then doing the best you can in this platform that you have, in a class or YouTube, whatever. I think
now
you want.
I understand.
Yeah.
What do you mean, like as a space, this man as a space, and not this
factory
line? This factory line.
Thank you for asking, because maybe I need to re-explain that. Yeah, I mean that in a good way. I mean that the intention here is the right intention. And it's just not just about having more students and more classes. It's really about giving some value.
But anyway, to continue the training, did you train somewhere abroad? Because you were living in Israel, but then you went to India. So what did you go to India?
I just went to India last year, and I had more or less about a month training, and it was very interesting because it was pretty different than everything I have done before. Because these days when you take a course or when you go to a class, it's more modern. And I thought I would find something different, but it was actually not as different as I thought, but still different.
Were you disappointed in some way with the kind of journey you had?
Yes, actually I came back pretty disappointed. Now I'm not, like, looking back, I'm not disappointed. I think I had exactly the experience that I needed. But yeah, I was disappointed. I thought that because India is the origin of yoga, I thought it would blow my mind and it didn't. So I think it's just a matter of expectations. I had the wrong expectations, I guess. But it doesn't matter, because if you go through an experience and you are willing to be open enough to maybe re-experience it in your mind, then you can study whatever you need to learn. So I studied that. I learned that my expectations were not real, like not something that I can find in this world. But I also learned that I focused on the wrong thing. Like, I should have focused on just experiencing that, whatever it is, and not expecting that I would have more advanced poses over there, or like learn philosophy that I never heard of before, because eventually it's all the same. Like, if you choose to be, like we talked before, if you choose to be Christian or Jewish or whatever it is, we all have those sets of principles, and we all have to go through a journey. And I feel like lots of the things that we're going through are, at the end of the day, it's the same. Maybe it looks different, but...
Maybe one of your problems was that you didn't take 10 years of your life to go to some mountain and just live there and connect.
Which is something that I would love to do. I don't know if I would benefit from that, because it's all about, you choose something and on the other side there's something that you didn't choose. So just about choosing something. Yeah.
I would love to continue the conversation with you, but we're kind of running out of time because we have not short, but I don't want to use adjective, but we have an allocated time that Manna very kindly gave to us. Before we begin, I just wanted to condensate, maybe you could condensate, like, for people that are listening that are maybe starting yoga, or maybe people that are starting their journey to become yoga teachers, what, based on all your experience, all your reflections, all your learning, could be the advice you would give to them?
That's a great question. So many advices I can give, but at the end of the day, what I also, before coming here, the message I wanted to send is that yoga is many things. You can look at it from different perspectives and choose different aspects of yoga. But I think if you just decide to do it, if you have started it and you don't have something else that is really good for you, so you can just do it and decide to stick with it, even if some things doesn't feel very like they make sense, because you can always change the practice a little bit. If you tried Ashtanga and you don't like it, you can try something else. And I'm placing aside the fact that if you don't like it, maybe it's a sign that you should do it. But
yes.
But what I mean is that yoga originally was something very specific, and now it has the potential to be so many things, and you can definitely benefiting from getting to know yourself better. So I think this is the most important thing, that even if you're having a hard time or a hard class or a class that you define as bad. Just keep going, keep breathing, keep being kind to yourself, and that's really all you need.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, for your efforts. And I really appreciate it. I don't see also this conversation like as the end, because a bit earlier you asked me, how do I see you if as a teacher? But I think in the end, I try to see other people as just human beings who are on their own path, exploring themselves, exploring them and themselves to recover that distinction. But just, I think in the end, we're all clueless about how to behave in life and how to conduct in life, and we're all like desperately trying to find a way that makes a little sense, that not everything is chaotic and is suffering. So we try to make our best. And I see you as someone who's been in this long journey and was probably meditated more than average about how to best conduct yourself in the world. So I see also this kind of conversation as a stepping stone into that journey of trying to understand things a bit better and trying to not compare, but to engage with others in a way to expand your scope and to expand your perspective, so to be open to as many ideas as possible. So I hope that we continue to talk about in the future and continue to share experience. I just wanted to really appreciate being here and being in the moment, as you say many times, and for also doing something that you were not comfortable with doing, because I believe this is your first podcast. So
yes.
So also congratulations to you for doing something that is not obvious to you and something that is new. You're also very brave, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for saying that last thing you said, because you're right. It is just, everything I said here is just my opinion, and maybe if we'll do the same conversation in a year from now, I will think other things completely. So yeah, just take what you feel like taking from that. Yeah. And thank you very much for the opportunity.
It was a great honor. Thank you very much, and bye-bye, everyone.
Thank you.